Tanya Williams was tired. Not just the normal tired from working 2 jobs, but bone-deep tired. The kind that comes from fighting the same battles over and over again. She sat in her car outside Lincoln High School, taking deep breaths before going inside. This was the 3rd time this month she had been called to the school about her son Marcus. Not today, she whispered to herself, checking her reflection in the mirror. Her work uniform was wrinkled from the long shift, but there had been no time to change. The school had called just as she finished her shift at the hospital. Tanya fixed her hair quickly and grabbed the folder of documents she now carried everywhere. The hallways were quiet as most students had left for the day. Tanya walked with purpose toward Principal Richard Hansen's office. She had memorized the way after so many visits. The secretary looked up as she entered. "Mrs. Williams, you can go right in. They're waiting for you." Tanya nodded and pushed open the door to find Principal Hansen sitting behind his large desk. Next to him was Vice Principal Davis, and across from them sat Marcus, looking down at his hands. "Mrs. Williams, thank you for coming in," Principal Hansen said without standing. "Please have a seat." Tanya stayed standing. What happened this time? Principal Hansen cleared his throat. Marcus was involved in another fight with Brian Thompson. This is the 3rd incident this semester, and according to our policy, we have no choice but to suspend him for 5 days. Marcus looked up. "But Mom," he started it. "He pushed me into the lockers and called me." "Marcus," Principal Hansen cut in. "We've been over this. No one saw Brian push you. We only saw you hit him." Tanya opened her folder and pulled out a paper. "And what about last month, when Brian called my son that horrible name with 20 witnesses, and nothing happened to him?" "That was addressed appropriately," Principal Hansen said, his voice growing colder. "With a lunch detention?" Tanya asked. "While my son gets suspended for defending himself." Principal Hansen folded his hands on his desk. "Mrs. Williams, I understand you're upset, but the school has clear policies about physical violence." Marcus threw the first punch that was witnessed. Tanya looked at her son. His left eye was starting to swell. "And what about his eye? Did he punch himself?" "According to the students we interviewed, that happened when they fell to the ground," Vice Principal Davis said, speaking for the first time. Tanya felt her anger rising. She had raised Marcus to be respectful, to work hard, and to stand up for himself. After his father died 5 years ago, she had done everything alone. The long hours, the parent-teacher conferences, the basketball games, everything. And here was another example of her son being treated unfairly. "I want to see the witness statements," Tanya said firmly. "Those are confidential school records," Principal Hansen replied. "Then I want to know why every time there's an incident between Marcus and Brian, only my son gets punished. I want to know why the school cameras in that hallway weren't checked. I want to know why you keep ignoring the pattern here." Principal Hansen's face hardened. "Mrs. Williams, I understand you're emotional, but—" "No," Tanya interrupted. "Don't tell me I'm emotional when I'm being logical. This is about facts and patterns. This is about my son being treated differently, and we both know why." The room fell silent. Marcus looked up at his mother with a mix of pride and worry. Principal Hansen stood up. "I think we should continue this conversation when everyone is calmer. The suspension stands. Marcus can return next Monday." "This isn't over," Tanya said, helping Marcus gather his backpack. "Not by a long shot." As they walked out of the office and down the hallway, Marcus whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." Tanya put her arm around her son's shoulders. "Don't be sorry for standing up for yourself. We're going to fight this the right way." What she didn't know was that someone was watching them from the end of the hallway. James Whittaker, who had come to discuss a donation to the school, had witnessed the entire exchange. And something about Tanya Williams seemed strangely familiar to him. James Whittaker sat in his car in the school parking lot. He watched as Tanya and her son walked to an old blue sedan. Something about the woman tugged at his memory. Her fierce protection of her son reminded him of someone, but he could not place who. James was at Lincoln High School that day to discuss his yearly donation. As one of the richest men in Millfield, he gave money to many local places. The school always used his money for new computers or sports equipment. Principal Hanson treated him like royalty whenever he visited. After Tanya and Marcus drove away, James went back inside. Principal Hanson was still in his office, talking to Vice Principal Davis. "I tell you, Davis, I am tired of dealing with another angry black mom who thinks her kid can do no wrong," Hanson said with a sigh. "They never want to accept that their children break rules." James stopped outside the open door. He felt a wave of disgust hearing those words. He had planned to give $50,000 to the school that day. Now he was not so sure. He knocked on the doorframe, and both men jumped. "Mr. Whittaker, I did not know you were still here," Principal Hanson said, his face turning red. "I was just leaving," James said coldly. "But I think we need to reschedule our meeting about the donation. I have some things to think about first." James left the school with a new purpose. He wanted to know more about the woman and her son, not just because of what he had heard, but because of the strange feeling he could not shake. Back at his large house on the hill overlooking Millfield, James opened his laptop. He looked up the school records he had access to as a board member. He found Marcus Williams, age 15, good grades except for this year when they had started to drop. Father deceased. Mother, Tanya Williams. James then searched for more information about Tanya. He learned she worked as a nurse at the local hospital and had a second job at a coffee shop on weekends. Her husband, Derek Williams, had died 5 years ago in a car accident. The name Derek Williams made James freeze. Could it be? After all these years of searching, James walked to his office and unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk. He took out an old folder filled with yellowed papers. These were the letters he had found after his father died 10 years ago. Letters that showed his father, Harold Whittaker, had lived a second life in the next town over. Letters that revealed James had a half-brother named Derek, born to a woman his father had abandoned when his double life was discovered. James had been searching for this brother for years. By the time he found out about him, all trails had gone cold. The only thing he had found was an obituary from 5 years ago, mentioning that Derek Williams was survived by his wife Tanya and son Marcus. James had given up hope of ever connecting with his brother's family. Until today. He looked at a photo he kept in the folder. It showed a young black man, around 20 years old, with a bright smile. The photo had been in one of his father's letters. On the back was written Derek, age 20. James studied the picture, then thought of Marcus. There was a resemblance in the shape of their eyes, the set of their jaw. Could Marcus be his nephew? James made a decision. He would find a way to help Tanya and Marcus with their school problem. And maybe, just maybe, he would find the courage to tell them who he was. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer. "Stan, I need you to look into something at Lincoln High School. There's a student being treated unfairly, and I want to know all our options." What James did not know was that his help would come too late to prevent what would happen the next day. The next morning, Marcus did not want to go to school. He sat at the kitchen table pushing his cereal around in the bowl. "Mom, can I just stay home today?" he asked as Tanya rushed around getting ready for her shift at the hospital. Tanya stopped and looked at her son. The bruise around his eye had darkened overnight. She felt a pain in her chest seeing him like this. "Baby, I know it's hard, but we can't let them win by keeping you away from your education." Marcus nodded slowly. He knew his mom was right, but that didn't make it easier. "What if Brian comes after me again?" "You walk away and find a teacher. Document everything. Use your phone to record if you need to." Tanya sat down across from him. "I'm filing a complaint with the school board today. This has gone on long enough." After dropping Marcus off, Tanya went straight to the hospital. She was halfway through her shift when her phone rang. It was the school. "Mrs. Williams, there's been another incident," said the secretary. Her voice sounded odd. Tanya felt her heart drop. Is Marcus okay? You need to come to the school right away. 20 minutes later, Tanya ran into the school building. The main office was full of people. She pushed her way through until she saw Marcus sitting in a chair. His clothes were wet, and there was a cut on his cheek. What happened? She demanded, kneeling in front of her son. Before Marcus could answer, Principal Hanson appeared. Mrs. Williams, please come into my office. Not until someone tells me what happened to my son. A young teacher stepped forward. I saw everything. Brian Thompson and 2 other boys cornered Marcus in the bathroom. They were trying to put his head in the toilet when I walked in. Tanya felt a rage like fire spread through her body. And where are these boys now? Their parents have been called, Principal Hanson said stiffly. So they're just sitting comfortably waiting for their parents while my son sits here bleeding. Tanya's voice rose. Other parents in the office turned to watch. Mrs. Williams, please lower your voice, Principal Hanson said. That was when Tanya lost control. Lower my voice. My son has been bullied for months while you did nothing. Now he's been assaulted in your school, and you're worried about my voice. Marcus touched his mother's arm. Mom, everyone's watching. Let them watch. Let them hear how this school treats certain students. Principal Hanson's face turned red. Mrs. Williams, if you cannot control yourself, I will have to ask you to leave. I'm not going anywhere until those boys receive the same punishment my son got for far less. From the back of the room, a deep voice spoke. I think that's a reasonable request. Everyone turned to see James Whittaker standing in the doorway. The crowd parted as he walked toward Tanya and Marcus. Mr. Whittaker, Principal Hanson said. His tone completely changed. This is a school matter. A school that receives substantial funding from my family foundation. James replied calmly. I happened to be here for a meeting when I heard the commotion. It sounds to me like there's been a serious incident. James turned to Tanya. Mrs. Williams, is it? I'm James Whittaker. I serve on the school board. Would you like me to sit in on your meeting with Principal Hanson? Sometimes having a neutral third party can be helpful. Tanya looked at this well-dressed stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. She didn't know why he wanted to help, but she wasn't going to turn it down. Yes, thank you, she said. As they walked toward the principal's office, James looked at Marcus more closely. The resemblance to the photo of young Derek was even stronger up close. James felt certain now. This was his family. The meeting in Principal Hanson's office was tense. Tanya sat next to Marcus, with James Whittaker beside them. Across the desk, Principal Hanson looked uncomfortable. Let me understand this correctly, James said in a calm voice. Marcus was attacked by 3 boys in the bathroom. This happened after he was suspended for defending himself in a previous incident. The situations are different, Principal Hanson argued. In the first case, Marcus threw a punch. After being pushed into lockers and called a racial slur, Tanya added. James nodded. And today, these 3 boys tried to put his head in a toilet. Is that correct? That is what Ms. Peterson reported, yes. And what punishment will these boys receive? James asked. Principal Hanson shifted in his seat. We are still investigating. James leaned forward. Principal Hanson, I think we all know that if the situation were reversed, Marcus would be expelled by now. The double standard is clear. Mr. Whittaker, with all due respect, you just arrived. You don't know the full history. Then enlighten me, James said. Show me the discipline records for both Marcus and Brian Thompson. Show me how often each boy has been punished and for what. Principal Hanson's face turned red. Those records are confidential. Actually, James said, as a school board member, I can request them. And I am requesting them now. Tanya looked at James with surprise. She had never seen anyone challenge Principal Hanson like this. I also want to know why no one checked the hallway cameras during the first incident, Tanya added, feeling braver with James's support. What cameras? James asked. The school installed new security cameras last year, Tanya explained. But when I asked to see the footage from Marcus's first fight, I was told it wasn't available. James turned to Principal Hansen. Is that true? The cameras in that hallway were not working that day, Principal Hansen said quickly. I want that in writing, James said. And I want a full report on which cameras are not working in this school. The board approved a significant budget for that security system. The meeting ended with several agreements. The 3 boys who attacked Marcus would be suspended for 5 days, the same punishment Marcus had received. Principal Hansen would provide a full report on the security cameras. And most importantly, Marcus's suspension would be removed from his record. As they walked out of the school, Tanya turned to James. Thank you for your help. I don't understand why you did it, but I'm grateful. James hesitated. Mrs. Williams, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. Not here. Could we meet somewhere? It's a personal matter. Tanya looked confused. I don't understand. We've never met before. It's about your late husband, Derek. Tanya froze. What about Derek? I believe he may have been my half-brother. Marcus, who had been quiet, looked up sharply. What? I know this is sudden, James said, but I've been searching for my father's second family for years. The timing, the names, everything fits. Tanya shook her head. This is crazy. Derek never mentioned having a white half-brother. He probably didn't know, James explained. My father kept his second family a secret. When it was discovered, he abandoned them completely. Tanya looked at Marcus, who was staring at James with wide eyes. Can we talk about this later? It's been a hard day, and we need to process what happened at school. Of course, James said. He handed her his business card. Call me when you're ready. And please know, I only want to help. As James walked away, Marcus turned to his mother. Do you think it's true? Could he really be Dad's brother? Tanya put her arm around her son. I don't know, baby. Your father never talked much about his family. But there's one person who might know. Grandma Rose. Tanya nodded. If anyone would know the truth about your father's family, it would be her. Grandma Rose lived in a small house on the edge of town. She had raised Derek alone after his father left. Now she was in her 70s, but her mind was still sharp. Tanya called her that evening and asked if they could visit. Of course, baby. Is everything okay with Marcus? Rose asked, concern in her voice. Yes and no. There's been trouble at school, but that's not why we need to talk. It's about Derek's father. There was a long silence on the phone. I'll put on a pot of coffee, Rose finally said. An hour later, Tanya and Marcus sat in Rose's living room. The walls were covered with family photos, many of them showing Derek growing up. Marcus often studied these pictures, looking for parts of himself in his father's face. So, Rose said after they had settled with coffee and cookies, what's this about Derek's father? Tanya took a deep breath. Today we met a man named James Whittaker. He says his father had another family. He thinks Derek was his half-brother. Rose's hands began to shake. She put down her coffee cup. Whittaker, you said? Yes, Harold Whittaker. Rose closed her eyes. Lord have mercy, after all these years. So it's true? Tanya asked. Rose nodded slowly. Harold Whittaker was Derek's father. He lived in the next town over, had a wife and son there. I didn't know about them when we started seeing each other. By the time I found out, I was already pregnant with Derek. What happened? Marcus asked, leaning forward. When his wife found out about us, Harold disappeared from our lives. No support, no visits, nothing. I swore I'd never speak his name again. Derek asked about his father when he was young, but eventually he stopped asking. Did Dad ever know his father's name? Marcus asked. No, Rose said firmly. I never told him. What good would it do? The man was nothing to us. Tanya pulled out James's business card. This man, James, he wants to meet with us. He says he's been looking for his father's second family for years. Rose took the card and studied it. James Whittaker. Big shot businessman. I've seen his name in the papers. He helped us at school today, Marcus said. He made Principal Hanson listen to us. Rose raised an eyebrow. Is that so? He seems sincere, Tanya added. But I wanted to talk to you first before we decided anything. Rose was quiet for a long time. Finally, she sighed. Harold Whittaker broke my heart. He made me promises he never kept. But that's not this James's fault. If he's truly Derek's half-brother, then he's family. Maybe the only family Derek had on his father's side. So you think we should meet with him? Tanya asked. I think you should be careful, Rose warned. But yes, meet with him. Find out what he wants. Just don't get your hopes up. The next day, Tanya called the number on James's card. His secretary answered and immediately put her through when she gave her name. Mrs. Williams, James said, sounding pleased. Thank you for calling. I spoke with Derek's mother, Tanya said. She confirmed that his father was named Harold Whittaker. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Then it's true. We are family. Maybe, Tanya said cautiously. I'm willing to meet and talk, but I need to be sure. This would be a big thing for my son. Of course, James agreed. Would it help if we did a DNA test? That would prove whether Marcus and I are related. Tanya hadn't expected that. A DNA test. It's simple and painless, just a cheek swab. And I'll cover all the costs, of course. Tanya thought about it. A DNA test would settle things once and for all. If James really was Derek's half-brother, that would mean Marcus had family he never knew about. After losing his father, that could be important for him. Okay, she agreed. We'll do the test, but no matter what it shows, I need to know why you're doing this. What do you want from us? I just want to know my brother's family, James said simply. I missed the chance to know Derek. I don't want to miss knowing his son too. When Tanya hung up, Marcus was watching her. Are we going to meet him again? Yes, Tanya said. And we're going to take a DNA test to see if he's really your uncle. Marcus's eyes widened. Cool. Like on those TV shows where they find lost family. Tanya smiled at her son's excitement. Something like that. But remember what Grandma Rose said. We need to be careful. I know, Marcus said. But Mom, what if he really is Dad's brother? That means I have an uncle. Family from Dad's side. Tanya hugged her son. She knew how much he missed his father. If James turned out to be family, it could be good for Marcus. But she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was changing too fast. The DNA testing center was in a small office building downtown. James had arranged everything. When Tanya and Marcus arrived, he was already waiting for them. Thank you for coming, James said, standing up to greet them. The process is very simple. They just need to swab the inside of our cheeks. Tanya nodded. She had dressed carefully for this meeting, wanting to look professional. Marcus was quiet beside her, trying to act grown-up. A nurse called them back to a small room. She explained the process and had them sign some papers. Then she took swabs from both Marcus and James. The results will be ready in about 3 weeks, she told them. As they walked out of the building, James turned to Tanya. Would you and Marcus like to get lunch? I know this is all very sudden, but I'd like to get to know you both better. Tanya hesitated. She had taken the morning off work for the DNA test, but she was due at the hospital in 2 hours. We have some time, she said finally. There's a diner around the corner. At the diner, they sat in a booth by the window. James ordered coffee while Tanya had tea. Marcus got a chocolate milkshake. Tell me about Derek, James said after they had ordered their food. What was he like? Tanya smiled sadly. He was kind, hardworking. He loved to make people laugh. He worked as a teacher at the elementary school. Dad coached my baseball team, Marcus added. He was the best coach. James nodded, taking in this information about the brother he never knew. How did you two meet? College, Tanya said. We were both education majors. Derek went on to teach 5th grade. I switched to nursing in my 2nd year. Do you have any pictures? James asked. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed James photos of his father. James studied them closely. He has our father's smile, James said softly. I can see it now. What was your father like? Tanya asked. James's face grew serious. Complicated, successful in business but a failure as a father. He was cold, distant, always working. After my mother died when I was 15, we barely spoke. It was only after his death that I found the letters that led me to search for Derek. What kind of letters? Marcus asked. Letters from a woman named Rose, James explained. Your grandmother. My father had kept them all these years, hidden in a box in his office. There were also a few baby pictures of Derek. Tanya was surprised. So he knew about Derek. He kept the letters. Yes, James said. I think he regretted abandoning them, but he was too proud to ever reach out. Their food arrived, and they ate in silence for a few minutes. Then James spoke again. I want to be clear about something. I'm not here to make up for my father's mistakes. I can't do that. But I would like to be part of your lives, if you'll let me. Marcus is my only nephew, my only connection to my brother. We don't need your money, Tanya said firmly. James nodded. I understand. This isn't about money. It's about family. What if the test shows we're not related? Marcus asked suddenly. James looked at the boy. Then I've made 2 new friends who I helped with an unfair situation at school. But I believe we are family. There are too many connections for it to be a coincidence. After lunch, James walked them to their car. Thank you for today. I know this is strange for both of you. Take all the time you need. As they drove away, Marcus was quiet, looking out the window. What are you thinking? Tanya asked. He seems nice, Marcus said, but different from what I expected. What did you expect? Marcus shrugged. I don't know. He's so rich and important, but he doesn't act like he's better than us. Tanya nodded. That's true. But let's wait for the test results before we get too excited. And remember, even if he is your uncle, that doesn't mean he'll be in our lives forever. People make promises they don't keep, like Grandpa Harold did to Grandma Rose. Yes, baby, like that. But Dad wasn't like that, Marcus said firmly. He always kept his promises. Tanya smiled at her son. That's right. Your father was nothing like Harold Whittaker. He was a good man who loved us very much. As they reached home, Tanya's phone rang. It was Principal Hanson's secretary. Mrs. Williams, the principal would like to schedule another meeting to discuss Marcus's situation. Tanya sighed. She had almost forgotten about the school problems with everything else happening. When? Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Mr. Whittaker will also be there. Tanya frowned. I didn't ask him to be there. He insisted, the secretary said. As a board member. After hanging up, Tanya wondered if James was overstepping. She appreciated his help, but she had been handling Marcus's school issues on her own for years. She didn't need someone taking over, even if he might be family. The next day, Tanya sat in Principal Hanson's office again. This time, several people were there. Principal Hanson, Vice Principal Davis, the school district superintendent, and James Whittaker. Marcus waited outside with his grandmother Rose, who had insisted on coming. Mrs. Williams, the superintendent began. I understand there have been some concerns about how your son's situation has been handled. Tanya nodded. Yes. Marcus has been repeatedly targeted by another student. When he defended himself, he was punished. When the other student attacked him, nothing happened. That's not entirely accurate, Principal Hanson started to say. James cut him off. I have reviewed the discipline records for both students, as is my right as a board member. The difference in treatment is clear and troubling. The superintendent looked uncomfortable. Yes, well, that's why we're here today. We want to make this right. And how do you plan to do that? Tanya asked. First, Marcus's suspension has been removed from his record, the superintendent explained. Second, the students who attacked him have been given appropriate consequences. And third, we will be implementing new anti-bullying training for all staff and students. Tanya looked at James, who nodded slightly. He had clearly been working behind the scenes. There's one more thing, James added. Principal Hanson, would you like to say something to Mrs. Williams? Principal Hanson's face turned red. I want to apologize for any misunderstanding. That's not what we discussed, James said firmly. Principal Hanson sighed. I apologize for referring to you as an angry black mom in a private conversation. It was unprofessional and inappropriate. Tanya felt her anger rise again. That wasn't a misunderstanding. Those were your exact words. And you only apologize now because you got caught. Mrs. Williams, the superintendent cut in. I want to assure you that we take this very seriously. Principal Hanson will be required to complete sensitivity training. That's not enough, Tanya said. How many other parents and students has he treated this way? This isn't just about me and Marcus. James spoke up. I agree. That's why I've proposed a full review of discipline practices at Lincoln High, focusing on whether there are patterns of unequal treatment. The superintendent looked alarmed. That's a very extensive undertaking. Yes, it is, James agreed. And my foundation will fund it. We'll bring in outside experts to conduct the review. Tanya was impressed. James was using his power and money to create real change, not just fix Marcus's individual situation. After the meeting, Rose was waiting with Marcus. She stood up when she saw James. So you're Harold's son, she said, looking him over. James nodded. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry for what my father did. Rose studied his face. You have his eyes, but hopefully a better heart. I'm trying, James said simply. Rose nodded, seemingly satisfied for now. Tanya says you took that DNA test. Yes, we'll know for sure in a few weeks. The following weeks were strange for Tanya and Marcus. At school, things had improved dramatically. Principal Hanson avoided them, and the other teachers were extra attentive. Brian Thompson and his friends stayed far away from Marcus. James called every few days to check in. He never pushed, never assumed too much. He seemed to understand they needed time. Finally, 3 weeks after the test, Tanya's phone rang. It was James. The results are in, he said. They were sent to my email. Tanya felt her heart race. What do they say? I thought we should open them together. Are you free this evening? That night, James came to their house. It was the first time he had visited. He looked around with interest at the family photos, the comfortable but worn furniture, the school projects displayed on the refrigerator. Marcus was excited, bouncing on his toes. Can we see the results now? James pulled out his tablet and sat on the couch. Tanya and Marcus sat on either side of him. Ready? He asked. They both nodded. James opened the email and clicked on the attached report. He scrolled through several pages of scientific information until he reached the conclusion. Based on the DNA analysis, James read aloud, there is a 99.9% probability that James Whittaker and Marcus Williams share a genetic relationship consistent with uncle and nephew. The room was silent. Then Marcus spoke. So it's true. You really are my uncle. James nodded, his eyes wet with tears. Yes, we're family. Tanya felt a mix of emotions. Part of her was happy for Marcus, knowing how much this meant to him. Another part was worried about what would change. What happens now? She asked. James turned to her. Nothing has to change that you don't want to change. But I'd like to be part of Marcus's life, if that's okay with you. Get to know him. Maybe share stories about our family. I'd like that, Marcus said quickly. Tanya looked at her son's hopeful face. We can take it slow. Sunday dinners. Maybe you can come to some of Marcus's basketball games. James smiled. I'd like that very much. And I want you both to know that this isn't just about Marcus for me. Derek was my brother, which makes you family too, Tanya." For the first time, Tanya felt herself warming to James. Despite their different backgrounds, they shared something important. They had both loved Derek in their own ways. "I have something for you," James said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out an old photograph. "This was in my father's things. I think it's Derek when he was about Marcus's age." Tanya took the photo. It showed a young boy with Derek's smile, standing next to a woman who must have been a younger Rose. "Marcus, look," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's your dad." As Marcus studied the photo, Tanya caught James watching them with a strange expression. It wasn't pity or charity. It was something deeper. A connection. Family. Part 8. Word spread quickly through Millfield about James Whittaker and his newfound family. People who had known Tanya and Marcus for years suddenly looked at them differently. Some were curious. Others were judgmental. At the coffee shop where Tanya worked weekends, customers whispered when she served them. "That's the woman whose son is James Whittaker's nephew," they would say, not quite quietly enough. At school, Marcus noticed changes too. Teachers who had barely noticed him before now asked how he was doing. Students who had never spoken to him suddenly wanted to be his friend. "It's weird, Mom," Marcus said one evening as they ate dinner. "Brian Thompson tried to sit with me at lunch today, like we're friends or something." Tanya frowned. "What did you do?" "I told him to leave me alone. I don't need fake friends." Tanya nodded. "Good. Remember who was there for you before all this." James had kept his promise about taking things slow. He came to Sunday dinner once a week. He attended Marcus's basketball games, cheering loudly from the stands. He never showed off his wealth, always dressing simply and driving his least expensive car when he visited. One Sunday after dinner, James asked if he could speak with Tanya alone. Marcus went to his room to finish homework, and they sat in the living room. "I want to talk to you about Marcus's education," James began. Tanya felt herself stiffen. "What about it?" "Lincoln High is improving, thanks to the review we initiated. But there are better options. Marcus is bright. He could go to Westridge Academy. It's the best school in the county." "Westridge is a private school," Tanya said. "We can't afford that." "I would cover the tuition, of course," James said. Tanya stood up. "No, I appreciate everything you've done, James, but I don't want your money. We've managed just fine all these years." "This isn't charity, Tanya. It's what family does. If Derek were alive, wouldn't he want the best education for his son?" "Don't you dare tell me what Derek would want," Tanya said, her voice rising. "You never even met him." James looked hurt. "You're right. I'm sorry. I just want to help." "We don't need your help. Not that kind, anyway." James was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something? Is it because I'm white? Would it be different if I were black like Derek?" Tanya sat back down. "That's part of it, yes. You can't understand what it's like. The struggles we've faced. The way people look at us. Now suddenly there's a rich white man in our lives, and doors start opening that were always closed before. I understand that my privilege has made my life easier," James said. "I can't change that, but I can use it to help Marcus have opportunities he deserves." "And then what?" Tanya asked. "What happens when he's an adult? When he walks into a room and people don't know he has a rich white uncle? The world will still see him as a black man. He needs to know how to navigate that world." James nodded slowly. "You're right. I hadn't thought about it that way." "That's because you've never had to," Tanya said, but her voice was gentler now. "What if we found a middle ground?" James suggested. "Not Westridge, but maybe a summer program. There's a great science camp at the university. Marcus mentioned he loves biology." Tanya thought about it. A summer program would be different from changing schools. It wouldn't take Marcus away from his friends and community. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But we need to talk to Marcus too. He's old enough to have a say. James smiled. Of course. And Tanya, thank you for being honest with me. I'm still learning how to be part of this family. The next day, Tanya was working at the hospital when she saw something that stopped her cold. Principal Hansen was being wheeled into the emergency room on a stretcher. She stepped back, not wanting him to see her. Later, she heard from another nurse that he had suffered a minor heart attack. He would recover, but he would be out of work for at least a month. That evening, she told Marcus about Principal Hansen. I'm not glad he's sick, Marcus said, but I'm not sad either. Is that bad? No, baby. It's honest. We can wish someone no harm without forgetting the harm they caused us. A week later, James called with news. The school board just appointed an interim principal while Hansen recovers. It's Ms. Peterson, the teacher who stopped the boys from attacking Marcus in the bathroom. Yes, she's young, but she has good ideas about making Lincoln High more inclusive. I think this could be a positive change. Tanya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time, she felt hopeful about Marcus's school. Maybe he could stay at Lincoln after all. That weekend, they had their regular Sunday dinner. James brought Rose too, having formed his own friendship with her. Despite her initial suspicion, Rose had warmed to James. He reminded her of Harold in looks only. His character was entirely different. As they sat around the table, Tanya looked at this strange new family they had formed. It wasn't what she had expected. It wasn't what she would have chosen. But it was working in its own way. I have an announcement, Marcus said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. I've been thinking about changing my name. What? Tanya asked, surprised. Not my whole name, Marcus explained. Just my middle name. Right now it's Thomas after Mom's dad. I want to change it to Derek after Dad. The table was quiet. Then Rose spoke. I think that's a fine idea. Your father would be proud. James nodded. Marcus Derek Williams. It has a good sound to it. Tanya felt tears in her eyes. If that's what you want, baby, we can look into how to do that. Marcus smiled. Actually, Uncle James already helped me research it. We can file the papers next week. Tanya shot a look at James, who had the grace to look embarrassed. Sorry, he said. He asked me not to tell you until he was ready. See, Marcus said, this is why I need both of you, Mom for keeping me grounded, and Uncle James for helping me with the details. Tanya laughed despite herself. Her son was growing up, finding his own way to navigate this new family dynamic. Maybe she could learn something from him. 6 months had passed since James Whittaker entered their lives. It was a warm spring day, and Lincoln High School was holding a special assembly. The school gym was packed with students, teachers, and parents. Ms. Peterson, who had been officially appointed as the new principal after Principal Hansen decided to take early retirement, stood at the microphone. Today, we are proud to announce a new initiative at Lincoln High, she said. The Derek Williams Memorial Scholarship will provide full college tuition for one deserving student each year. Tanya sat in the front row, with Marcus beside her. James sat on Marcus's other side, with Rose next to him. They made an unusual family picture, but no one who saw them could deny the bond between them. The scholarship was established by the Whittaker Foundation. Ms. Peterson continued, to honor a former Lincoln High graduate who embodied the values of education, kindness, and community service. After the assembly, students and parents crowded around Tanya and Marcus, sharing memories of Derek. Many of the teachers had worked with him, either as colleagues or when he was a student himself. Your husband was my math teacher in 5th grade, one young mother told Tanya. He was the first person who made me believe I could be good at math. Now I'm an engineer. Tanya smiled through her tears. He would be so proud to know that. James stood slightly apart, watching. He had never pushed himself into the center of their lives. He had learned to wait, to listen, to support without taking over. Later that evening, they gathered at Tanya's house for dinner. It had become their tradition. James would bring the food, often from restaurants they could never have afforded before. But sometimes he brought simple home-cooked meals he had learned to make himself. To Derek, James said, raising his glass, "A brother I never knew, but whose legacy lives on." They all raised their glasses. Marcus looked at his mother, then at his uncle and grandmother. "And to family," he added. "The one we're born with and the one we find." After dinner, while Rose and Marcus did the dishes, James and Tanya sat on the porch. "The scholarship was a good idea," Tanya said. "Derek would have loved knowing he was helping students go to college." James nodded. Education was important to him. "You've told me that many times." It was. That's why I was so defensive when you suggested Westridge for Marcus. "I understand that better now," James said. "And I was wrong to push. Marcus is doing great at Lincoln, especially with Ms. Peterson in charge." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Tanya spoke again. "Do you remember what Principal Hanson called me? An angry black mom." James frowned. "I do. It was completely inappropriate." "Yes, it was. But you know what? Sometimes anger is the right response to injustice. I was angry because my son was being treated unfairly. I was angry because the system was failing him." "Your anger led to change," James said. "Not just for Marcus, but for all the students at Lincoln." Tanya nodded. "That's why I decided to run for school board." James looked at her in surprise. "You did? When?" "I filed the papers yesterday. The election is in November. I'm going up against Bill Thompson, actually. Brian's father. The very same. He's been on the board for 10 years. He's one of the reasons nothing ever changes." James grinned. "You'll beat him. And I'll help any way I can. Legally, of course. I don't want your money."